Yes, so it's Susan Hartley. I'm on the board of directors for ASI, and it's my pleasure to introduce Ellen Coady today. Ellen Coady is joining us from Harbour Grace, Newfoundland, and in her beautiful sunny house. And she's a program specialist in Programs and Services Division of the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development in Newfoundland. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts, Bachelor of Education from Memorial University, a Diploma Advanced Undergraduate Study in Home Economics from the University of New Brunswick, and a Master Degree in Education, Curriculum and Instruction from Concordia University. She has been involved in education for 31 years, both at the classroom and policy levels. Social and emotional learning is an integral part of Ellen's work, most recently working with colleagues to embed social and emotional learning outcomes directly into provincial curricula using a comprehensive school health approach. And it's lovely to see you again, Ellen, and I'll pass it to you.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, and good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's been a pleasure to be around the ASI table and as a presenter for, I guess, a couple of years now. And it's always good to be able to share what we're doing here in this province around social and emotional learning, because we are really learning by doing and willing to share the mistakes that we've made and what we've learned along the way. So I'm going to start with trying to unpack a little bit of the title of this session, which is about nurturing. And it kind of ties in nicely with what Jean Clinton was saying yesterday around the nature versus nurture kind of debate. But there's a lot of good that can come out of nurturing, even though the original climate that a person may have come from may not be conducive to social and emotional learning. So when we look at the word nurturing, I just threw a bunch of ideas as they came to my head. Okay, what is it? What is that art all about? Who does the nurturing? Where and when does it take place? Who needs to be nurtured? What's the purpose of nurturing? And how does nurturing work along with the long-term plan? So you may have a whole bunch of other questions that you may be crossing through your mind right now as I'm speaking about what is nurturing all about. And if you're wondering, like, what you're in your position, what does what's your role or what's your responsibility to be a nurturer in your organization, whether it's in any world of work or in a school system or in your own family unit. So in the nurturing world, there's a lot of good that can come out of it when it comes to social and emotional learning, because as we'll come to a little bit later, the whole idea of social and emotional learning is something that is grown. It is a process, and it is very much something that takes a long time to build over time. Okay, so we're going to begin with a little check-in. And this is, we can, because we're in a virtual environment, we'll have to do it virtually, or you can use your chat box, however you want to do it, and we can moderate there to see who's saying, we don't even just know who's saying what, but what is being said. So if we begin with a check-in, if you were to describe right now in a word or a phrase what you're feeling, where are you right now in terms of how you're feeling? So if you could just take 20 seconds and jot down a word or a phrase. You can put it in the chat box if you're comfortable, or if you just want to keep it to yourself, that's fine too. But if you do that now, that'd be great.
And just a reminder, you can use the chat box in the Whova page.
Okay. Okay, so that's about 20 seconds. So to the right of your screen, you see a thermometer. So the word or the phrase that you've written down, how would you classify that emotion that you're feeling right now? Like, is it towards the bottom where it's, I got to get rid of that, all these people on the side of my screen here so I can see the words. So when you look at it, so the calm section is down towards the bottom of the thermometer. So is what you're feeling, would you put it down there? Would you say you're a little bit more aroused in terms of your emotional state? in terms of maybe you're a little bit agitated or a little bit, maybe you rushed to get here, maybe your technology didn't work so good, whatever the case. So, and you can see if the words get a little bit more intense as we climb the thermometer scale there. So where would you place yours? So when we look at that, that gives you an idea of where you are, which is kind of an indication of your self-awareness, which is one of the social and emotional learning competencies. So this is a great way to start in a classroom. It's a great way to start a meeting in the world of work, because when people come and they gather and the task is very specific about what it is you're going to be doing, then you need to be ready to do that task. So the idea is it gives the presenter or the meeting leader some information, and it also gives the participants some time to check in with themselves to see, am I ready to start this work yet? Or do I need to do something first? So if you would, does anyone have any or want to share where they are in terms of the emotion thermometer? No, do we have anything in WUVA? In the chat?
Not yet, no.
Okay, okay, that's fine, then that's perfectly fine. So when we look at that, let's just imagine that some people there's people all over the thermometer there. So when we look at that, that is an indication of the activity in your amygdala, or how active it is at that point in time. So we'll go to the next screen. So that one there now is telling you about this tool. I am going to be giving you some tools as we go through this hour and a half, and this is the first of them. So in terms of being a nurturer, if you are the leader of a meeting, or if you are a teacher in a classroom, or a principal in a school, whatever the case may be, you can use this. You don't have to be like an expert in SEL in order to get this kind of language out into your organization. So basically, you need to understand that this gives the students or the participants some ideas as to, it brings them in tune with what they are feeling. It recognizes emotions can be temporary and they can change depending on the environment. So using the data we get from this, a teacher or a team leader or a meeting leader can change the environment. You need to recognize, as students can recognize, to identify an emotion, one needs to be tuned into their verbal and nonverbal cues. So as a teacher, you can gain awareness, or as a meeting leader, you can gain an awareness of how students are feeling at a particular moment in time. So that's your data. So now that you have the data, like for example, if we had all written something into the chat box, or if we were in a real live space, we would have the thermometer in the back of the room somewhere, and I would be able to see where all the stickies landed. So that would give me some information about where my people are in terms of how they're feeling. Okay, so when we look at that, the debrief, the benefit is that you have that data to use. Now, what are you going to do with it? There's no sense to just simply collect it and get people to put a sticky up there saying how they're feeling. People have just opened up and have been very self-aware and have shared that. So now, what are you going to do with it? So the whole idea is that you now can do something with it. So for example, if I find the breathing techniques, like depending on the space that I'm in, they can work really well. So if I see that my participants are all over the map in terms of how they're feeling, then I need to get everybody into that calm zone, because I need the amygdala to be calm for everybody, because if the amygdala is not calm, the emotion center of your brain, the prefrontal cortex will not engage because it can't. Those two things are connected. So when we look at the data, I may have to do something to get everybody down towards that calm section. All right, so one of the things that I typically do are the deep breathing. Now, deep breathing involves really taking the time and not being conscious of yourself in the environment that you're in, or that being, aware of the person next door to you and what they're going to think. So if we all just do it together now, you're going to take a really, really, really deep breath, and you're going to inhale till your lungs are so full. And when they're really, really full, you're going to exhale really slowly till there's nothing left in them. So that's what we want to be able to do. And you will need to repeat that a couple of times, or however many times it takes for you, so that you start to feel a sense of calm. And you can almost feel it going out of you as you're doing that exercise. Okay, so what we do with little kids sometimes is we say, okay, we're going to imagine I'm going to smell the flowers, and they actually hold their hand like this so that they're actually visualizing smelling a bunch of flowers. And then when we exhale, it's blow out the candle, but it's going to be a real slow exhale, so you're holding onto a candle. Okay, so let's give it a try. So we're going to inhale really, really deeply, go. And exhale really slowly until you're completely empty. You're going to do it again. You're going to smell the flowers. Blow out the candle. And if you need to do it more times, you would. And then you should start to feel a calmness that will put you in a better place to participate in a learning activity. So that is one thing you could do. In addition to that, if you wanted, or as an alternative to that, if you wanted to do like a yoga stance, anything that would be your go-to strategy for bringing down the amygdala to a calm state. Okay, so that was your first tool. So the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, if you can remember a visual, this would be the visual that you would think of. If you're trying to, you don't have to be an expert in SEL to be able to use this. So these two parts of the brain, they work in opposition. So when one is calm, the other one is activated. When one is activated, the other one is calm. So if we look at the amygdala, the emotion center, when that is activated, the prefrontal cortex cannot do its job. So there's no learning happening, there's no thinking, no executive function, nothing. The person is absorbed by emotion. So the calmer you can get the person, the more you can get the prefrontal cortex to engage. So that's your relationship with those two parts of the brain. So when learning happens, the prefrontal cortex is in high gear. It is the amygdala is really calm, and it's really doing its job. It's asking a question all the time: am I safe? Am I good here? Am I safe? And there's no activation in terms of a feeling and emotion. And in that case, the prefrontal cortex is able to work and participate in learning and participate in whatever the activity is at hand, and give it its full attention. So you can see how, whether you're in a meeting or whether you're in your classroom or wherever you are, maybe you're at a scene of an accident or whatever, like the amygdala plays a role in a lot of different situations where if you need a person to do something or to think, they cannot think if the amygdala is overactivated. So that's the role of these two pieces of your brain. So what does that look like in real life? So when I told you the question the amygdala is always asking is, am I safe? And if the answer is no, I'm not safe, then you're probably looking at a reaction of either fight, flight, fight, or freeze. So in those three columns right there, whatever the person's reaction is to the amygdala being engaged, then these are the kinds of activities that you might see or behaviors that you might see that person doing. So if they do a flight reaction, This is what, so the items that are listed there, the 8 or 10 items there, that's what they're doing when their amygdala is overactivated, and that is their response to it. If they have a fight response, they're going to be doing some of the things that are in the middle column. So if you're scanning down through those there right now, that's the kind of thing you will see in a person. If they have a freeze response, then the third column is what they would be exhibiting. So the amygdala is a pretty complex piece of the brain, and Jean Clinton, I think, did mention it yesterday. The amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and the responses that people have actually turn into behaviors that we have to try then to work with. So when you see these kinds of behaviors, then generally it's because the amygdala is activated. So when we looked at that in terms of language, we talked about a process at the very beginning, and nurturing is very much a long-term process when it comes to social and emotional learning. The idea is that from a very young age, we would like children to be able to develop the language that is very articulated in terms of the emotion that's being experienced. So when a child is able to name it and associate it with a behavior that they're experiencing, then that is the first step. So naming it and being able to say, okay, this happened and I feel blank, whatever. So that's the first step of the emotion coaching, is what we call it. So it's that process of being able to say, to move from I'm feeling this is why, now what's okay, I can't punch a wall, or I can't hit another person, or I can't, we don't want that to happen. They are the outbursts that we sometimes hear about in schools and in classrooms. So we don't, before they get to that point, we want to move them to a place where they can say, okay, I'm feeling really frustrated right now, and before I hit somebody, I need to fill in the blank, whatever it might be. So the person that is experiencing that and is able to name the emotion associated with a behavior or something that happened, and then realize I have to stop, I have to get myself in a calmer place, and I have to think about what I'm going to do, what my solution is going to be to this problem, to the frustration that I'm feeling, or whatever the case may be. So it's a very complex bit of work that goes on with the brain. Okay, so that whole process is what we call emotion coaching. And it is very much a progression, and it very much needs to be nurtured by, for small kids, by the adults in the room. So yes, children will have outbursts and whatnot, but they can't continue on that trajectory into adulthood, because they'll find themselves in a lot of trouble. So the idea is that over time, they learn how to deal with the emotions that they're feeling. And that is a learned process. So the process is being aware of the feeling, being able to name it, knowing the behavior or the trigger that caused the feeling, having a strategy to deal with it. And the first one is for them to just stop and realize what's going on around them, get the amygdala calmed down, and then plan how they're going to move forward. So that is it's a complex process. I mean, some adults can't do it, but over time, I guess if we're aware that it's happening to us, then we can try to change our response to a situation that causes an emotion. So that's another tool there that you have, and it's called emotion coaching. And you may want to delve a little bit more into that if you work with small kids. And even I used it on my brother just last week. He was home visiting and whatnot, and trying to do all little odd jobs around mom and dad's place. And he decided that he was going to burn some some leaves were there, but some twig branches and stuff like that were dried up. And so he lit the fire bar. And because it was under a canopy of trees, and it was a little bit windy, the smoke from it went across the garden, across another garden, towards the neighbor's house. So the firemen were called. So anyway, long story short, when the firemen came and I went down the hill to see what was going on, he said, oh God, he said, and there's and every hose here is tied up, and and the extra hoses in the basement, they're all tied up. And anyway, I said, so I recognized it right away that the frustration levels were like here. And I said, are you feeling a little bit frustrated right now? I said, because of this happening. And he said, yes, no, he said, I'm really ticked off with myself, he said, for letting this happen, like to actually make this be an incident where the firemen were called and whatnot. So it was quite interesting to see his reaction. He was blaming everyone around him because the hoses weren't readily available and they were tied up and, you know, stored away in the basement and couldn't find anything to add to the hose that was currently out in the yard. So it was funny. I said, I could recognize that he was more mad with himself than he was with anybody else, but it was coming out as he'd been frustrated with the way things were in his environment. So it was an interesting piece of work that I was saying, this is SEL. So I won't tell him that I shared that story, but anyway, so what are we doing here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and how are we bringing about social emotional learning into practice and bringing about some systems change? Well, what we want to share with you is the roadmap we built, the approach that we are using, which is comprehensive school health, and so providing you with some practical experiences through engaging you in the use of SEL tools that we're using in our toolbox here in this province. So it's kind of a where we've been and what we're doing kind of approach. So no matter where you are and what your work is, if you're going to go down the road of social emotional learning, you need to know, okay, where are we right now and what do we need to do? So that's the first question you have to ask yourself. We had to ask ourselves the same thing. We were nudged along a little faster because of these two reports down the bottom of your screen, the Premier's Task Force on Improving Educational Outcomes and the Way Forward and the Towards Recovery report that all came out in 2017. So when we look at those, they were covered with social and emotional learning and positive mental health and a whole lot more. So we really had to map a plan as to, okay, how are we going to make these things happen? How are we going to make mental health different here in Newfoundland and Labrador? So this was the beginning of our roadmap work. So you will find that you're going to need some tools along the way that will help you out. So you've got two already. The first one was the check-in with using the capturing how you were feeling and then what do you do with that. And then the second one was doing some emotion coaching when you see things that are indicative of the amygdala being overactive. So you'll need some more tools besides that, and we'll try to help you with giving you some of those. So the Newfoundland and Labrador Roadmap for Social and Emotional Learning Integration, they were big stops that we had to create, and there were a lot of little things that happened like in between. So we knew that social and emotional learning, while the gist of it, we said, well, a lot of people we often heard the phrase, it's just good teaching. Well, yes, it is, but there's some very purposeful teaching around the competencies that we would like children and youth to have. So we had to work with that idea and figure out how are we going to get everyone on the same page and singing from the same songbook. So that was one of the tasks that we had to do. And when we quickly realized that it could not be just the students in the classroom who were going to be good at this at the end of the day. We needed everyone to be good at it. We needed the people who were in positions of authority, people who were in decision makers, the people who were sitting in the administrators' seats. We needed everybody to be in the know about social and emotional learning, the benefits of it, how do you do it, and especially the how do you do it part. Because if you're interacting with a young person, and I'm going to use the young people for this example, even if you're interacting with your co-workers, it's the same thing. But in a school system, if you're interacting with children, they need to be getting the same consistent message, the same consistent approach. So the bus driver can't treat them a whole lot differently than the classroom teacher would treat them, or the principal when he deals with them on an issue. They can't be all using a different strategy and a different approach and a different way of talking to the child. So the idea is that everyone is in the know and everyone is trying to toe the same line. So the very first step was developing some kind of common understanding of SEL. One group can say it's this, and another group turn around and say, no, it's this, or it only includes this, or whatever the case may be. So we need to develop, okay, blanket approach. This is what we're adopting as a province as what a social and emotional learning is and what it entails. We then moved on to, okay, if we're going to tackle any kind of a problem, it might not be social and emotional learning, it might be vaping, it might be drug abuse, it might be smoking on school grounds, whatever the case may be. How are we going, when we tackle a problem like that, we use a comprehensive school health approach. And so the Joint Consortium for School Health, which were all member provinces, all the provinces are members of that national organization through health and education, I think, except the province of Quebec. So that is something that we all know about. And when we tackle problems using that approach, we usually have more success. We needed to know that the adults in our system were knowledgeable about SEL. If the principals, the teachers, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, if we're going to expect all the adults and the parents to be speaking to kids in a certain way to get different results than what we're getting right now, then SEL had to be professional learning for them before we could start to do anything in the classroom, because you want your adult body to be in the know so that they could then try to influence the students. And obviously the SEL for students would come from their whole school approach, which included their curriculum. And then the spin-offs would be social emotional learning for school communities. So that was the big picture roadmap that we were trying to work with. Okay, so for understanding the common understanding, we went to Castle as our go-to place for, in terms of, yes, they've done the research and the evaluation, they've done the development, they've been down that road. So we didn't need to go down that same road and do it all again ourselves and find the same thing. So as a province, we decided that yes, that we would piggyback onto the Collaborative for Social and Emotional Learning and for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, so the CASEL, and use some of their work. So we did do that, and that got us on the road. Now, I am going to play you videos 5 minutes, and it gives you a nice synopsis of the, oh, sorry, no, this is the teacher video. So I'm going to escape here. This is one of our teachers in Corner Brook, and her name is Ashley, and prior to any of this being implemented as a province, she was, and her guidance counselor were trying to do some work around social and emotional learning. Anytime now.
Social emotional learning means many different things. It's the idea, I guess, of children and even ourselves understanding our emotions and how the emotions are tied to our brain and how our brain controls our emotions and our behaviors. I guess as a teacher as well, social emotional learning means the idea of creating a positive school climate and building positive relationships amongst students as well as adults in the building. And it's also allowing students to be able to problem solve and to self-regulate, and helping them develop strategies to be able to do that on their own independently, because that's very difficult for them.
Okay, so just a little short clip. And, oh shoot, did I exit that? Oh no. Okay, so I'll have to,
You may need to, oh, you're
I
good?
gotta go back. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
I think I am. I'll just open, because I'm going to need it again, so I may as well just open it now and have it done. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so minimize Ellen instead of close out of everything. Okay, self-talk is wonderful. All right, so here we go. So this, that little clip just shows you the nurturing that had to happen in order for that teacher to make that move. At the time when that was recorded, which is a couple of years ago, pretty much there was no directive to be doing social emotional learning. She realized that her kids were coming to school in such a way that it was very taxing on her as a teacher, taxing on the other kids in the room in terms of the behaviors that she was having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So working with the guidance counselor who was nurturing her on how can I do things differently? How can I create a better environment? And with guidance counselors, they're very much well-versed in social emotional learning. So if you have that resource to tap into within your work environment, it would be an excellent resource because they understand all of the workings of the behavior and the brain and all that, changing the environment so that things can be different and better for everyone involved. So that is one of the things that came out of that little clip there. And she's had a lot of success to the point where her kids look forward to coming to school, to her classroom every day. And it wasn't that way months before she started making the changes. So it's something to really look forward to as a child. So in terms of, okay, so how do you get there? How do you get to that point? Self-assessment is, and anywhere you start on this journey is, okay, what is self-assessment? What do I already know? Where am I along the social and emotional learning path? So these are some tools here. And again, I'll bring one up to show you that's a little bit clearer. Where did that go now? So this one was directed, this is a result of our responsive teaching and learning policy. And self-assessment is a component of that around the social and emotional learning. So this one is directed at district staff. And you'll notice that every one of these, there are 3 of them that we developed. One was for district staff, one was for administrators, and one was for teachers. So the self part is pretty much all the same when you look at them. So like for that example, this one says, I celebrate and learn from my strengths and successes. Or if I do that, I say, yeah, got it. If I don't do that very well, then yeah, I'm trying to work on that. Or the last column would say, no, I'm not there yet. I don't really celebrate my strengths and successes. Maybe that's something I need to do. Maybe I'm not self-aware enough to know that I do something really well and I have a strong point in my personality or in my abilities. So that's really, really tied to your self-awareness. So this whole self-assessment is a lot about that. Because this is a district one, the second part of it asks the district person to ask about things. What do I do with colleagues, teachers, and parents? Because that is the population that someone who works at a school district would deal with. So their co-workers, their colleagues, teachers that are out in the system that they are supporting, they would be talking to them and the administrators, and the parents. The parents often call the school board and ask, for whatever, the issue may be, program specialists or people in the executive level of the school district would be dealing with parents. So when you have social and emotional skills, those dealings can be very positive. So it's a lot of good stuff can come from this. So these are some tools that we can share with you. Maybe you can tweak them for your organization to see exactly how that would work for you. So we can certainly do that. So from the current slide, okay, so this was the definition we adopted, and it's directly from CASEL. It hasn't been changed at all. So if you want to take 20 seconds and read through that, and just see is there anything that really hits you as you're reading through. Okay, if there was a word that really struck home to you, if you want to put it in the chat, you can. If you're on the side of your scrap paper there or somewhere on your writing materials, just flag the word. What is the word or phrase that really caught your attention as you're reading through that definition? I can share with you what a lot of people usually highlight, and one that I really like is the whole word of process. Because through our experience in doing what we've been doing for the last 5 years, particularly, is very much a process. Nothing happens all at once. It's very much do this first, and then we'll build on that, and then from that we can move on to the next thing. So very much a process of building social and emotional learning competencies in adults and children. So for us, or for me, that is the word that I really tuned into. Say, oh yeah, this is not going to happen overnight. This is very much is a process. So were there any other people who had words that they liked out of that definition?
For me, Ellen, it is the building positive relationships, because I don't believe you can encourage learning and social emotional development without relationships.
Exactly, yeah, very much so. A lot of things are relational, and once you move out of that realm of being self-aware and being able to self-manage, you're into the world of relationships. So how do you navigate that world if you don't have SEL? So it's establishing and maintaining those positive relationships, the positive ones that we want. Okay, so if you're looking to read more on that, casel.org is the website that you can go to if you want to go there and see what other resources they have for you. They have a lot of stuff there. So that was the definition we hung our hat on. Okay, so this is the definition. Okay, so this is a little 5-minute video, and this one plays directly from the screen. So it's 5 minutes and 29 seconds. So you can have a listen. It's a nice synopsis of the social and emotional learning.
What are the 5 core SEL competencies? They are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. These 5 competency clusters are interrelated and often operate simultaneously. These 2 clusters focus on intrapersonal skills related to self. The 2 in green focus on interpersonal skills related to others, and the 1 in yellow focuses on responsible decision-making. The 5 SEL core competencies include skills that are significantly correlated to success in school, work, and life. Self-awareness is the ability to recognize one's own emotions, thoughts, and values and how they influence behavior. It is the ability to accurately assess one's strengths and limitations with a well-grounded sense of confidence, optimism, and a growth mindset. It involves identifying emotions, accurate self-perception, recognizing strengths, self-confidence, and self-efficacy. Self-management is the ability to successfully regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in different situations, effectively managing stress, controlling impulses, and motivating oneself. The ability to set and work toward personal and academic goals. It includes impulse control, stress management, self-discipline, self-motivation, goal setting, and organizational skills. Social awareness is the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds and cultures. It is the ability to understand social and ethical norms for behavior and to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. It includes perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, and respect for others. Relationship skills are the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. The ability to communicate clearly, listen well, cooperate with others, resist inappropriate social pressure, appreciate conflict constructively, and seek and offer help when needed. It includes communication, social engagement, relationship building, and teamwork. Responsible decision-making is the ability to make constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on ethical standards, safety concerns, and social norms. It is the realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions and a consideration of the well-being of oneself and others. It includes identifying problems, analyzing situations, solving problems, evaluating, reflecting, and ethical responsibility. So what does a comprehensive approach look like? The goal of a comprehensive approach to SEL is to create a school community that is constantly building capacity as a healthy setting for living, learning, and working. The focus is on prevention and not intervention. We want to equip students to independently use the skills and behavior that promote well-being. A comprehensive approach to SEL recognizes that to develop social and emotional competencies successfully and sustain these skills over time, an integrated system of supporting learning environments is required, including the classroom, school, and community environments. Acquiring social and emotional competencies occurs on 3 levels: through SEL curriculum and instruction, through systemic school-wide implementation practices, and through family and community partnerships that support the modeling and reinforcing of SEL at home and in the community. At the level of SEL curriculum and instruction, schools are encouraged to adopt evidence-based SEL programming for all grade levels to identify and develop SEL learning outcomes embedded into curriculum and to incorporate instructional strategies that promote SEL into all teaching and learning. A comprehensive approach to SEL has been proven to impact students' academic success, social and emotional skill development, and students' ability to regulate behaviors and emotional distress. It has also been shown to positively impact teacher effectiveness, instructional practices, school and classroom climate, and to reduce teacher stress and burnout.
Okay, so I guess my question for you now, having seen that, is how could you use a tool like that, a little video that explains, gives you a snapshot of the overview of the social and emotional learning competencies, to create that general understanding within your team or organization? So that is really, I guess, the idea, I'll leave that one there. The idea with that. So from a nurturing perspective, how could you use that video? I can certainly provide you with the copy of it. That plays directly from the PowerPoint. So when you have access to that, you'll have access to that video. And if you needed to tweak it for your own organization, you certainly could. So there are lots of little things, little ways that you can help in that step one, create that general understanding. So you being a nurturer would be able to share the knowledge, okay, here's what this is all about, so that everyone then goes from the springboard of that common understanding. This slide right here that you're seeing now, when you go to castle.org, there's a 2-pager there that has the full wheel, which is the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, on one side of the page. And then on the back side of the page are all the definitions of each of the competencies and examples of what they mean. So we pass that out a lot. And I still see it on the walls in my colleagues' offices. So we use that as our message. This is what we're talking about when we say SEL. These are the things that we want included and what the competencies that we want developed in youth and young people. So the whole idea is based on that sheet right there. And that's something that you can go and get yourself from the website castle.org. Okay, so the circle is another tool that you can add to your toolbox. When you're trying to look at the teaching of social emotional learning, it is very much a social process. So it involves not just the involvement of the content of what is social emotional learning, but it's also with others in the learning community. So it's relational. Research shows us that children who have experienced reliable and safe interactions show improvements in the executive functions that are critical to social and emotional learning. So feeling safe and feeling that you can be fully participating in an environment really is conducive to social and emotional learning. The circle is a highly structured, intentional space designed to promote connection, understanding, and dialogue within a group. The circle is powerful. It is a powerful tool for building relationships, establishing norms, and working through difference or doing problem solving. It holds a healthy balance between individual and group needs. Within the circle, everyone has a voice, and in social and emotional learning, it is very important for a person to find their voice and to be able to speak what it is they're feeling and the reasons why. And to be able to share that with others so that they understand where that other person is coming from. So within a circle structure, the consistent positive interaction between students and teachers help in making connections through a focus that values the contribution of all of the members. So there are rules to do circles and to do them properly. So the restorative justice approach is definitely probably an area that you could do a little bit more research on and use if you wanted to use that as a technique, either within meetings or within a school environment. So that very much is a different way. So if that has not typically been a thing that you've been doing within your organization, it's almost like the analogy of opening a door and not really sure what's on the other side. But if you try the circle, you'll be amazed at what can come out of trying to use that as a part of your regime of tools that you have that you can rely on to get you from A to B, or to start changing some classroom environments within a school or a work environment. Okay, so back to our roadmap. We talked about the different stops along the way, and we talked about using a comprehensive school health approach. I did also mention that as members of member jurisdictions within Canada, the health and education sectors are part of this organization for the Joint Consortium for School Health, and we have all signed on to using that kind of an approach. And you'll see to the left there within the circle, things have to be happening in all 4 of these areas in order for you to tackle problems successfully, or to try and implement a new thing successfully. So whatever it is that you're working on, so implementing for us is implementing social and emotional learning. So how are we doing that? And we are doing it by having activity in every single one of these arenas. So your teaching and learning, your social and physical environment, your partnerships and your services, and your healthy school policy. So again, you can, that's also on the web. So if you need, and there it also is, everyone has a 2-pager. So the 2-pager is, talks about the approach, and then some further explanation of, well, what do you mean by teaching and learning? And it talks about that as well. So that will, it really is the how of how you will do your work, okay? So the first stop for us, like we had a very gentle nudge in terms of in province of Newfoundland and Labrador, because we had 2 policies, well, the 2 reports were kind of directing us down the road of social and emotional learning and positive mental health commotion, so doing the upstream work. And also the reports also referenced how they were going to deal with all aspects of mental health. So it wasn't just the mental health promotion, it was all aspects. But in the education system, we were really tasked with looking at the upstream. How can we do some mental health promotion work within school? So these 2 policies, one is came about as being brand new, and it's the responsive teaching and learning policy. And it was spent right on because it was focusing on literacy, numeracy, and social and emotional learning. So for that policy alone, social and emotional learning had a huge, huge focus. So we were very fortunate in that way. Also, as a result of this work, we saw that the one of our other policies, which was called Safe and Inclusive Schools, was being revamped to be healthy, safe, or no, Safe and Caring Schools was being revamped to be called now Healthy, Safe, and Inclusive. I think I got that title correct. Healthy, Safe, and Inclusive Policy. And that is being framed up using a comprehensive school health approach. So it's being, I guess, held up under those same 4 pillars of comprehensive school health. So no matter what it is you're trying to do to make a school healthy, safe, or inclusive, if you follow the comprehensive school health approach and have activity happening in all of the elements, then you will have some success. So there are 2 policies from the comprehensive school health approach wheel that we just looked at. So that's what was driving us, the 2 policies there. So when you could use this as another tool in your toolbox. So if you're going to use the comprehensive school health approach, you may be asking, okay, so, and you want to implement SEL. So you would be saying, okay, so what do we currently, the same 3 questions appear in all 3 blocks. What are you already doing to support SEL? Because a big mistake would be to say, well, we got to start all over. Forget whatever we're doing right now. We need to start over. We need to do SEL. Some of the things that are already happening are SEL based, and they contribute to creating that positive environment that you're trying to make in your system. So then how do you use the data to inform what you're doing? So when you look at your school system or you look at your work environment, what data are you using to inform what's going on, or what initiatives you take part in, or what initiatives you want to take on? And then you have to look at, okay, what do we do next? So this really is like an environmental scan of looking at your environment and the place where you will be a nurturer to say, okay, where are we right now? What's currently happening? So you look at the social and physical environment. What is going on in our social and physical environment that supports social and emotional learning? So for example, does the bus driver greet the kids in a nice positive way in the morning, or is it a grunt when they get on the bus? Or are they bawled at from the time they get on the bus until they get dropped off at school? I know 3 o'clock in the afternoon buses are pretty loud from my experience, and So like how is the bus driver contributing to like a positive environment, well, especially when they come to school in the morning? Who greets them at the door when they come into the school? Anybody? Nobody? And what do they say to them? When they come into their classroom, like what's said to them, like who greets them, that kind of thing. So that's all part of your social and physical environment. So what's going on there in an orchestrated way that supports social and emotional learning? And that's a very easy thing to change if what's happening there is not supporting social and emotional learning. Okay, so we would do the same thing for each one of these elements. So the teaching and learning and the partnerships and services, you would do that as well. You would need to really look at all of the components of that approach and see where do you stand, where do you sit right now. And it's definitely, you would need more space than this, obviously, if you were going to be writing on it. But that's what you really want to be doing, is to checking that out in more detail. So it's definitely another tool that you can use to actually to get going. Okay, so when you do that kind of an approach, these are the kinds of things that you can expect to have happen. So in terms of SEL, these are, if the activity involves like these 4 things right here, then short-term outcomes are what you'll have happen in the blue. So if you want SEL skill acquisition in the 5 competency areas, then you need to have some things happening in the green. Kids don't pick it up automatically. There will need to be, going backwards, where's the explicit SEL instruction? That is your teaching and learning. Teacher instructional practices. So looking at that, okay, how can we support teachers with professional learning so that they are able to teach the SEL skill acquisition? When you look at the orange column, these are the behavioral and academic outcomes that you can expect to have happen. So, but again, according to the title at the top, you need action in all 4 areas of the comprehensive school health in order to have a fulsome, benefits that come from it. Okay, so if we look a little bit more closely, so back to that wheel again, SEL requires explicit teaching of social and emotional, it requires explicit teaching. So when you look at any skill that you're trying to develop, so if we remember back to the 2-pager with the definitions of each of the 5 competencies and the kinds of things that are included under each one of them, they need to be taught. Sometimes we assume, oh, they're the soft skills, people pick them up on their own as they're going through. They don't. So we need to be explicitly teaching how some of these competencies work. So for example, I'm just thinking of the compliments. Like I mentioned this one yesterday. We often, when we compliment, oh, your hair looks lovely, or here's a nice jacket, or that's a nice pair of shoes, but they are really superficial compliments. They're only about the things that a person has. A real authentic compliment really speaks to the value of a person. And in the social and emotional learning world, you really want to get at the core of a person. Giving them a nice compliment about something they did for somebody else or to help somebody else out really gives them a boost in terms of their own self-esteem, and it creates that self-awareness. Maybe they weren't aware that what they were doing was like bang on in terms of helping somebody else was a really nice thing to do. So it helps create that self-awareness that they are that kind of a person. So it really is a nice thing that for teachers to teach explicitly. Like, how do you really recognize and give value to a person? So that is just an example that there is explicit teaching required. Okay, so for us in Newfoundland and Labrador, the 2-pager I shared with you, which showed you the wheel for the 5 competencies and the definitions on the back, that's all we had when we started. We have since built a document that's going to be released this fall that shows educators where we're going with social and emotional learning from a key stage outcome approach. So we have built statements, outcome statements, for the key stages of grade 3, 6, 9, and 12. And this document shows, tells teachers basically, so when a child gets to grade 3 or at the age of 8, they should be able to bang, 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 bang. And all the outcome statements are listed there. So then when we write, whoever writes curriculum for health or social studies or whatever subject, fill in the subject, because this is right across every subject area, the curriculum writer can go to this document and say, okay, by the time they're in grade 2, or by the time they're in grade 3, they should be able to do this. I'm rewriting the grade 2 social studies. So what can I do in my curriculum area to support a student's social and emotional learning? Maybe it's a conversation with the teacher, and I'll say conversation in quotes, because when we talk to the teacher in the curriculum guide, we're giving them some ideas of what to look for, what to do, and how they can reinforce social and emotional learning. I can give you music as an example, even like some of these on the periphery. So when a child is performing in a music environment, it comes with, I guess, the whole idea of asking for some feedback. So for the teacher will have to be aware that when you get feedback, you might not always like what another person says. So what are you going to do with that when you hear it? So that's social and emotional learning. So the music teacher in music class can be also talking about social and emotional learning and how you deal with the emotions that you feel when somebody critiques your work or somebody gives you a compliment about your work or whatever the case may be. So these are all examples of how we meet the key stage outcomes by building year over year over year, so that we have the grade 3 key stage outcomes accomplished by the end of grade 3. So we are currently in the position of writing grade 2 and grade 3 health, because health is going to be the anchor subject, but all the subjects have to reference SEL. So kindergarten and grade 1 are out in pilot this year with SEL embedded in the guide. So the teacher doesn't have to worry about what do I have to teach to do as social and emotional learning. We provide them with a resource so that they can, and the curriculum guide will bump them out to a resource for the explicit teaching, bring them back in for some of the other stuff we had to do. So it's a kind of a to and fro with support from a resource that they'll be given. So there's that. So we talked about the explicit teaching. So once you teach something, then there's the practice of SEL. Oh, shoot, gone the wrong way, hang on. So the practice of SEL. So teachers are the models. So when we teach it and when they have all the nuts and bolts down pat, then there's opportunities for practice, modeling and practice. If students don't get to practice, they will never get good at it. So teachers or people who are in a lead role have to model and provide opportunities for practice. So that is very key towards the acquisition of SEL skills. So the whole idea that they have to be able to practice it in order to get good at something. So the last two, for the systematic change to happen, there also need to be efforts in the area of partnerships and services and the healthy school policy. Policy we're okay on because we have the policy. So who are our partners and who are the services that we need to be availing of in order to further support using a comprehensive school health approach? So for social and emotional learning, there are a lot of government departments who are very much interested in social and emotional learning and being able to support schools in what they're doing, because it is such an important way of improving mental health and creating environments that are more optimistic for learning. So the partnerships and services are very, very important. Okay, excuse me. So we talked about stop number 3 of building some knowledge, and we talked about the adults and we talked about the students. So social emotional skills are more malleable than IQ, so therefore they can be taught in childhood, adolescence, and even into adulthood. Some of us are probably learning SEL skills for the first time late into adulthood, and that's okay. Jean Clinton talked about the brain, and the best time to be learning new things and for the brain to be able to change its structure and build its structure based on the environment is when you're much younger. So it's always good that when a child is young, and she also mentioned before coming to school, that they have some opportunities that builds these SEL skills. They're not too young to learn them. And I think she tagged the age of 3. So there's lots of opportunity there to start building those SEL competencies from a very young age. So nurturing in that perspective is really through parenting and through early childhood education. So there's all kinds of partners there that need to be doing some nurturing along with the broader system. So this is an article that you'll find very interesting to read if you're interested in what teachers come into the system with. And this is, I think it was done at the University of British Columbia, but it also is looking at the US system in particular. And they are looking at pre-service teachers and what the programs are that they actually engage in before becoming teachers or early childhood educators. And it is amazing to see how much we do not demand of them in terms of social emotional learning skills or knowledge before they actually come to the system. So that's a pretty good article there, because if we don't know what the demands are on a pre-service teacher before they come into an education system, then it's not their fault. So we need to be looking more broadly, partnerships and services. The universities and the post-secondary institutions are our partners, because they give us the experts who come out of the university system and come into the school system to be our future teachers and early childhood educators. So we really need to be looking at, well, are they learning SEL when they go to university? If not, then that's a gap that we need to work with partners to try and fill. So this is a national scan for teacher preparation on social and emotional learning. So it's a really interesting read when you get some time yourself to go do that. We talked about self-reflection as a tool. So it is also it's something that you can do yourself, but it's also a tool that you need to be self-aware in order to be able to self-reflect. All right, so the self-awareness competency really is a skill that is driving you to self-reflect. So stress impairs the development of the self-awareness and self-regulation. So if we're looking at the teachers, researchers have explored the link between classroom teachers' burnout levels and students' physiological stress response during cortisol levels. You're probably wondering, well, what does this have to do with SEL? Well, if a teacher is experiencing high levels of stress or teacher burnout, then that is influencing the environment in which learning is supposed to happen. So from that perspective, the teacher's SEL skills really need to be strong in order to, I guess, make sure that whatever it is they're experiencing is not impacting the learning environment, because there's a lot of to and fro between teacher and students and how learning can happen. And the idea of creating that safe, welcoming environment is where you really get the SEL skills to flourish. So self-reflection is hugely important for everyone involved in the classroom environment or the work environment. Okay, so this one here, this is Susan Follett. Okay, I'm going to jump out of this one again. And it's her self-reflection. And Susan has been around the table of the SEL world with us in Newfoundland and Labrador since we started the SEL project back in 2015. And they were very much involved.
Have to start with you. You have to start with you. You have to look at yourself. If you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, oh yeah, this is something else now, another bandwagon we're jumping on. If you're sitting there going, oh yeah, great, something else I got to do, well then right away, you're someone who has to take it. You really have to stop and say, okay, do I want to be that person that's going to sit in the boat and watch it sink? Or am I going to be the person who tries to work that plug whatever way I can get it to stop the leak from happening? Who do you want to be, really? So that is the biggest thing. You've got to start with yourself. Are you happy with the way things are going? If you're in your classroom every day and you're stressed out because there's so much interpersonal angst happening, and there's something out there that can help you, it's not going to be instantaneous. There's no quick fix to anything. But if there's something out there that's going to help you down a path where that part of your day is going to get better, and when that part, that social part gets better, then your academic part is going to come on side and get better, because the studies show that it does get better. Once the social and emotional side is taken care of, academics come on board and get and show improvements. So how can you not want to try?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. How can you not want to try? So she asked some really good questions in terms of her own thoughts on what she saw around her in terms of her approach to social and emotional learning. It was all very new to us back in 2015. And looking back, what we learned from that really is driving how the approach we're taking now when we start to write new curriculum documents. It's not just say, okay, here you go, here's your SEL resource, here's your curriculum guide, make it all work, poof, and it all just kind of go gels together nice and easy. That didn't happen initially. So we've learned from that. So this is a spread here. Oh, shoot. Concurrent slide. This is a copy of the key stage outcomes I referenced a little while ago. So this is was under construction at the time. I put this in here, so we have some things highlighted in red. But this is a document that we will have published this fall. And it really gives the curriculum writers, okay, when we say, this is for self-awareness, so when we say that a child has to be competent in self-awareness at the end of grade 3, we're saying these 3 big ideas here down the left. And when we say that, like for GCO 1, we are saying these are the little things that come out of that should contribute to them being self-aware by the end of grade 3 to their age appropriate level. Okay, so that's something to look forward to coming out from us in the fall. We've got a teacher who is hugely invested in social and emotional learning long before we were getting going down this road. And this, I guess, is his few information bullets or slides from him and what he has been doing to nurture over in his shops. And he basically realized that he was working in an environment where it was very, I guess you could almost say a little bit troubling in one way, but he knew that he had to make some changes to his school environment in order to support the children that were coming to him day in and day out. So this is their little synopsis. So they started looking at what are we doing for these groups. So he looked at students first. All right, so they needed to look at the core SEL strategies. So they were looking at basic things like we talked about a little while ago. Who greets them in the morning? Like what happens during their day? Is the environment created for them safe? looking at community time, trying to draw in the community because that was a very difficult thing for them to do. Bringing in some guest speakers for the students and developing some reading incentives. Putting emphasis on reading because, again, if you think back to the policy that we're operating under, which has literacy, numeracy, and social and emotional learning. So he needed to bring some focus back on reading, but it couldn't be because they had to pass a test or they had to write a book report. It had to be because they enjoyed it. So bringing some, enjoyment back to the learning environment, bringing back some readers, developing a tiger's den, because that was their school mascot. Maker education was another initiative they took on, which gave the kids something else, something different to do. Summer reading, he kept his library open during the summer months so the parents could come in with their kids and change out their books because that was their community library. And developing a school garden. So these probably don't scream SEL to you, but when you look at your social and physical environment, it does a lot to change the environment for the kids in his school. Okay, how do we get out of here? Okay. All right, so then he looked at teachers. Okay, so what are we doing for these groups or this group? So he looked at schedule changes, wellness days for teachers, getting pedometers and podcasts because being healthy and physically active, that all impacts your mental well-being. Mindfulness training, another idea that they brought on as a staff. Personalized professional learning. So if a teacher really I need to know more about, not the whole staff, me, I need to know more about, and providing that opportunity for the teacher. He bought them all journals and they started to journal and do some self-reflection. They did adult book studies. They created shared meal times and dressing down to give back. So in other words, working on an initiative together. So how they have seen changes and growth happen within their school as a result of working with students and working with teachers. Attitudes towards reading changed. Reading achievement went up. Behavior improved and staff morale improved. So they were all good things. So what did he do with his schedule? Because he did mention the teacher schedule, and these are PLCs or professional learning communities. And there's 3 blocks there on every day. So everyone did literacy, numeracy, social emotional learning. Literacy, numeracy, social emotional learning. The first thing they did every day when they came in was a focus on literacy, focus on numeracy, focus on social emotional learning. So as they were doing these things and building over time, it was really setting up the day so that the kids could get more improvement, I guess, in their environment and in what they were doing as students. So they saw changes in the reading level. So if you look at the different colors and how they changed from the 2018 to June 2019. So he was really pleased with how that was happening. It has major improvements there. In terms of behavior, and this one is really fun. It really goes.
I'm sorry, Ellen. I'm just going to interrupt a moment. If Deborah's listening, can you please mute your microphone? Or Sabrit or Wendy, can you mute Deborah's mic, please?
Okay. So when we look at these two slides, I found them funny because I said, this is really awesome, because he had done so much work with the kids in his school in the year that he was doing the work. And then when in the following year, the new kindergartens came in, they were the trouble. I really thought that was so cute because they had not been exposed to all of the initiatives that he was trying and the staff was trying within their school environment. So it really spoke to the idea that what he was doing was really working. So that was really good. He pointed out also, like with kids who were in grade 4, which were his trouble spot, and how that had changed into the next year. So it was really a success story in terms of how all of those little things that he nurtured with his staff and with the students. By nurturing the staff nurtured the kids. So it really became like a whole community, whole school community approach. So this is another nice article that you might want to have a look at. I guess the thing to remember is a program will do what it is designed to do. It does not mean that what you want it to do is what will happen. So it's good to remember that. So when you're picking out, or maybe you need a little resource to put in the hands of some people, then remember that, ask yourself, what is this designed to do? And is this the same thing that I want it to do in my personal situation? So that is the important question that you have to ask yourself there. There are all kinds of programs out there. They all seem to hang their hat on SEL. This supports social emotional learning, and it may, but is it supporting what you want it to support? So you have to ask yourself that question. Some programs are only designed to work on one part of SEL. And if that's what it's designed to do, and it does that, that's perfect. But if you want to develop SEL more broadly, you need to pick a program that approaches SEL more broadly. So this is a nice article here that gets you to start thinking about that. And it lays it out nicely for you in terms of what the programs are really doing. So if that aligns with what you want, then you're in the right shop. Okay,
Ellen,
so
we're at the 8-minute warning.
Okay, I'm almost there. Okay, so for this particular one right here, I find this is an excellent tool to have in your back pocket. If you're working with young kids, or even if I used it on my parents who are 86 and 82 a couple of weeks ago. And I said, oh my God, I'm a counselor now and everything else on top of what else I do. But it allows you to problem solve with all the invested parties around the table or sitting with each other. So it is an easy way to nurture social and emotional learning skills. Sometimes when we tackle problem solving, we do it, okay, I'll go talk to that person and find out what happened. You stay there. I'll go over here and I'll talk to the other person. I'll find out what they say happened. You stay over there. But this approach gets you to, okay, so who's involved in the problem? Let's say if someone took someone's pencil off their desk without asking and won't give it back, whatever. Let's just do a real simple one. So you bring the kids together who have the problem. Say, okay, teacher is not solving the problem for them. The teacher is going to facilitate the problem for them. And the teacher will say, okay, can you tell me what is the problem and state how you feel right now? So the child does it. Then you look at the other child and you say, can you tell me what the problem is, your version of the problem, and how you feel right now? So now it's on the table. Everyone knows how everyone feels and what they think the problem is. Because the problem may be, this child doesn't think it's a problem, but this child does. So now this child over here, oh, I didn't realize that was a problem for you. So that's how it starts. So once each party says how they feel and what their version of the problem is, so then now the teacher will facilitate and say, okay, so what are we going to do about this? The teacher does not say, okay, you're going to give back the pencil, and next time you need a pencil, you're going to ask. That's what we're inclined to do. So it's to cover your mouth and kind of say, okay, no, okay, so I'm not going to say that. I say, okay, so what are we going to do about this? And from there, the kids can give the ideas of what they should do. And this is the key. The suggestions have to be amicable to both parties. If it's not amicable to both, there will still be a problem because one person is still not happy. So that is the key thing about problem solving. that whatever the solution that is suggested is, it has to be, yeah, okay, I'm good with that. Yeah, okay, I'm good with that. And off they go. They try it. And the teacher will say, now, do you need me to help you with that? And kids will often say, no, we'll try it on our own and come back and let you know how we make out. And then they go from there. So that is basically a facilitated approach to problem solving rather than problem solving for them. Because if we go back to way earlier in the presentation, you have to give kids a chance to practice. So if we show them a way of problem solving, then we have to give them the chance to practice the problem solving method. So that's another tool you can put in your toolbox, and I can give you the notes that go with that. So we're all role models, or we're all trying to be role models. So the roadmap to SEL success, it involves all of us who are going to be acting together. So in going right back to the first tool that we looked at, the self-check-in, check-out. So for the checkout for this session, for this 1.5 hours, self-reflection is an SEL skill that people, especially educators, use to continually evolve. So as you leave the session today, ask yourself, what is something I'll try as a result of this presentation, something I'll still question, or I still question, and something I want to learn more about. So from your own perspective and your own self-reflection, as a nurturer and your role in nurturing SEL, what can come out of this session for you? Like, did you learn something that you didn't know before? Are you going to be willing to try something different within your organization? What is it that you can now self-reflect on and bring it into your practice so that you can evolve your practice to a new level? So they are the 3 questions. So I leave you with this one. You're probably, hopefully you're sitting there now saying, nurture, what does that mean for me? How can I do it? And if we go right back to those first questions that we looked at the beginning of the presentation, you might have some answers to those now, thinking about your own organization and where you sit within it and how you can effect change within it. And if there are any questions, I can take them. I don't want to stand between anybody and lunch.
I think, thank you so much, Ellen. I always love hearing about SEL and have attempted to bring that into the Bachelor of Education program in a different kind of way in PEI. So I appreciate that. I'm going to ask if anyone has questions to drop them in the Q&A, and maybe we will do that offline so that people can get to lunch. But thank you again, and if there's any last words from anybody or real quick questions, we do have 2 minutes. But I see some people are running to lunch already. So it's interesting because what you said about every system or program is perfectly designed to achieve the results it gets. And that is how our next session at 12:45 starts, when we're talking about economics and doing economics as if well-being matters. So I invite everybody to come back at 12:45 for that. And again, Ellen, thanks so much. And I'm sure people can send you chat questions through Whova.
Yeah, I think my government email address is there, and if anyone wants to pop me an email and say they attended the session, I got a question on, or can you, I'm going to put together the like the documents that I referenced. If they're not accessible through the PowerPoint, I know a couple of videos weren't, so I'll put those together and so people can access them, and I'll say, you know, slide whatever video, and if they wanted to use them.
That's lovely, because you've given us a lot of food for thought, a lot of information. So thank you so much on behalf of everybody.
Perfect, thank you. Enjoy lunch.